And we're here with Conor Ryan. Conor, what is up?
Nothing much, man. What's going on with you?
Nothing much. It's funny. I just noticed this. Whenever I do a show with you, I do a stopwatch to make sure that it's like 30 minutes or so. Most listeners know it's 30 to 35 minutes. Anything longer than that, people get bored. I get bored. You get bored. We all get bored. So
Of
I
course.
always do stopwatches. And I noticed since the last time we recorded, I did not stop the stopwatch. For those who are watching on YouTube, which you can do, go follow Bruins Ringside on YouTube or subscribe. We're going to be posting a lot of content there. You'll see that we're currently at 114 hours, 27 minutes, 41 seconds. And I'm going to reset that for today's episode. So that has been going since
It's a clean
last
slate.
week. We're starting fresh. So, yeah, I love when I see the stopwatch. It's funny. I had an iPod Touch when I was younger. And I think I let the stopwatch go for like 4 or 5 years. And I'd pick it up every couple months or so to be like, oh my God, this is crazy. I was very young then.
Technology, right? That was everyone when they first got like the first iPod Touch. That was the coolest thing. They would check the stocks. Like I would check stocks when I was like 11, 12 years old and be like, oh, it's a rough day, huh? Like I had no idea what I was even looking
You
at.
see a red arrow going down. It's funny.
Yeah,
I got my first iPod Touch around like 2008. So I did not get a good opening to the stock market seeing it in 2008.
Yes.
That was
Bad
very
timing.
rough. Bad timing. But I remember when I got my first like mobile device, I was like, oh my God. I'm like all the parents with their Blackberries. Like I got my iPod Touch, which in comparison to these phones is like this big. It's tiny.
Oh yeah.
But oh man, those memories of iPod Touches and MP3 players. I was not an MP3 player guy. I did not grow up. I didn't grow up during that time when I never had an MP3 player. But like I bet you probably did in that time, I would think, or at least
I
like,
actually
saw
did. No, my
iPod.
first one was just like the iPod Nano, like the super slim one. I had that. That was the first one I had. So before that, I don't even know. Like I think I just had nothing to do. I think I would just sit on the school bus, stare out the window like kids did from like the 1900s to like the John Hughes movies. They just did nothing. They just talked to people like a normal person. Now
So
it's
weird. Who talks to
yeah.
people?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I want to talk about your day going to school. No one's happy. Now you just put your headphones in, you're all set.
And when you put your head against the bus window and it was
Oh, of
cold.
course. And then the
Oh,
bus driver intentionally drives over a pothole and just bang your head against the. That's how you woke up.
you know what's
Now, now,
funny?
now, now we feel like the people who like would tell their kids they would walk to like a storm to go get like a pack of cigarettes in the
Yeah,
60s, or like they would walk through a snowstorm to go to get like something from Blockbuster.
milk and bread.
Yeah, exactly. Milk and bread. It's gonna go from milk and bread to like I had to go through a blizzard to get the Goonies from Blockbuster to I don't know what our story is gonna be. Probably that we went through like a pandemic and it sucked, but
Well, the
it's
pandemic's
not.
big. I think the pandemic is definitely up there. I mean, I have my grandmother who lived through Vietnam, World War II, was like, she was like, this is actually like has had a bigger impact on America, or like has impacted everyone's life more than I think that did. So, I think that's up there. I think we have a valid case to be a victim in this
Yeah,
situation.
I think I
But
have a feeling. I have a feeling we're gonna fudge it a little bit though. It's gonna be like how when the Celtics won in '08 and Brian Scalabrine was like, yeah, I didn't play 1 minute, but in 10 years, like I'll tell people that like I scored a few points. In 20 years, I'll tell my kids that I started a game, and in 40 years, I'll probably tell people I was MVP.
yeah,
Like that's what it's gonna be.
so we'll be like, during that time we were like scraping the ground for food, and
Hmm.
like I had COVID for like 6 months, and
Right.
I just maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll just
Yeah.
fudge it like that. It's funny. You mentioned the bus. We'll get into Bruins stuff in a second because I actually am excited to get into what we're talking about in this episode because it's all very relevant to this upcoming season. But before we do, this goes to show you how quick times have changed. There was a bus driver I had when I was younger, when I was in like early elementary school, who would drive and play trivia with us. So what she would do is she would drive while she drove. She would have like Trivial Pursuit and read questions. So like on her lap were the questions, or I don't remember where she held the questions, but she had the bus microphone, steering the bus, and she would be reading the questions off. And then she'd be handing kids tickets in the back if you got a question right.
Is this
Now,
Miss Frizzle your driver? What the hell is this?
like at the time, it was the coolest thing. But looking back on it, it's like, wow, that was kind of dangerous. Like that
Yeah, you had
could have
Mad
ended
Max Fury
terribly.
Road driving you to fucking school in Framingham.
Miss Frizzle. But yeah, obviously times have changed. And who doesn't remember the great bus stories of our time? But nevertheless, let's get into Bruins stuff. Because I want to spend this episode looking at some early questions that we have going into training camp. Whenever that training camp happens, I would assume somewhat soon, if January 13th is when they're aiming for, I would assume that we'll sort of start to get into things over the next few days and weeks, which I'm very excited for, as you should all be. So we're going to get into questions, biggest questions heading into training camp. And we're going to go question by question, breaking it down. Throughout training camp, we will get into these questions deeper. We will both have stories on how these are developing, but this is just a early look at some of the questions. And I have 5 listed. You can obviously mention some if you'd like. But I think number one, and a lot of people I think forget that this happened and that the Bruins are going to be starting their season like this, but Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak are most likely out to start the season for the Bruins.
Yep.
My question to you, who steps up in their place?
Yeah. Well, I think we'll have to see what the new timeline is. I think you have your fingers crossed that hopefully Marchand won't miss that much time, because I think like what the trajectory for them is I think Marchand be ready to come back around January 15th. I want to say, like, around then. So I don't know if he's going to be ready to start the year, but if he's, if he's not ready for the season opener, he hopefully at the very least should be like skating and hopefully like joining practice pretty soon. So hopefully it's not that much of a layoff, but still, when you go, even a few games without 2 of your top 3 guys in your top line, that's a big hit. And especially in this season where you have fewer games, every game's going to mean a lot more in the standings. So, even if you're treading water for the first month when David Pastrnak's probably going to be out, it's still not ideal. Like, you still have to build a bit of a lead in this new division. So for the Bruins, what I would imagine happens, I could see Craig Smith being a guy that slots up there at right wing on that top line. Kind of fits not obviously the same production in the slightest, but he kind of fits a similar role as Pastrnak in terms of being more of a trigger man, a guy who shoots the puck a lot. So I think he'd be a good fit up with Bergeron. And then it kind of depends on what your priorities are in terms of what you think fits best with that line and Bergeron. Like, I wouldn't be surprised maybe Anders Bjork gets a look there, because Anders Bjork played a good amount his rookie year with Bergeron and Marchand. Granted, it was right wing, but it seems like Bjork's kind of settled into that left wing role. So I think that could be a line. Obviously, DeBrusk is an option there if they want to do that, but you would imagine that they'd probably want to, keep him with Krejci at least at the start of the year to see if they can get that kind of momentum back. But there's options, obviously, but none kind of they all kind of pale in comparison to having your top 3, your 2 best wingers available for best case scenario, maybe a game or 2, at least in Marchand's case. But I don't think you're going to see Pastrnak back until February.
Yeah, Pastrnak's going to be out a lot longer, but when you really look at it, obviously you cannot replace Marchand and Pastrnak. No lineup in hockey can replace your 2 top wings. So I do think that the Bruins should go into this looking at it as, let's try some things out. I know it's a shortened season, but you're not going to get stable production with Bjork and Smith on your left and right. Maybe you do because you do have Bergeron in the middle, but it's not guaranteed,
Mm-hmm.
So try out different people. Try out Bjork. Try out Smith. Try out Stadnicka. Try out Nick Ritchie if you want to. Try out Andre Kasha if you want to. Try out Jake DeBrusk on the first line. So to me, you need to kind of use, and I know it's your first line. I mean, I think during that time, Krejci, DeBrusk, and whoever's right wing is, which we'll get to in a second, I think will end up being your more stable top line, so to speak. But I do think that try some people out. Try Stadnicka next to Bergeron. I think that's going to be something that, if he does make the team, which is, I think, a good chance he does, I absolutely think that is something they should try. And Craig Smith's another one. I think Craig Smith's a definite to be on that top line when the season starts, or at least you should be, as well as Bjork. So for me, I think there's a lot of things you can try there, and you need to use that time to actually try some people out. I also think, and this is something that I think we'll hit on as the season gets going, is when Marchand does come back, it'll be Marchand, Bergeron, and who knows? You could try Craig Smith, Anders Bjork, Jack Stadnicka, whoever you choose there. And if that goes well, if that ends up working, move Pastrnak down next to Krejci.
Yep.
This is something that I think spreads out the score, and we've all kind of a lot of people have kind of said it for a while, but the top line is just so good that that people kind of, don't want to break it up. But
Right.
if it's being forced to be broken up, see how Marchand and Bergeron do without Pastrnak on the right side. It's been a while. It's been a long time since they haven't had Pastrnak on the right side. So to me, I think that, Marchand, as you said, won't be out that long. So that'll be kind of a 1 or 2 game thing where they have two different wingers. But after that, you do have kind of an open canvas on that right side,
Right.
as well as the power play. You don't have that one-timer. You got to figure out someone new for that position. Is it Krejci? Is it Craig Smith? So that is sort of the Marchand Bergeron thing, or Marchand Pastrnak thing, that I think a lot of people forget. I think a lot of people are so, like, when you mention the Bruins
So
coming back, it's
excited
like,
to
oh,
have
yeah.
the season back, and like, oh, where's
and then they're like,
Marchand
oh,
Pastrnak?
wait, what happened to Marchand and Pastrnak? Because that was kind of slipped out there on like a Wednesday afternoon in like October, I think. That was announced. So the other thing I want to touch on, and this is something we touch on every year, is Krejci's right side. This is something that we can never quite
annual
shore
tradition.
up. Annual tradition at this point. It's there's the top 3 traditions in the United States: Christmas, Festivus, and who's the right side of David Krejci. That's really what it comes down to. You Seinfeld fans out there will understand me. Who should be David Krejci's right winger? When everyone is in the lineup healthy, who should be the guy?
I mean, I'm always a fan of bumping Pastrnak down there to spread out the scoring, because I think even whether it be, Craig Smith or Stanika or someone, I think there's at least someone in there who, at the very least, like, is that top line going to be as good as when it's Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak? No, of course not. But if you have it that maybe that top line goes down a little bit, but the second line is, here, I think the Bruins would take that if you have 2 legitimate, top 6 lines there. And, that could also benefit the Bruins in terms of, if it's Stadnika's the guy, I mean, who better to kind of learn from in terms of being on the ice than being on a line with Bergeron and Marchand, or, Craig Smith, who, again, shoots the shit out of the puck whenever he's on the ice. So at the very least, he's going to be able to finish some plays. Is that going to happen? I think the jury's out on that. I mean, you even look at 2 years ago when they lost Pastrnak for over a month and it was Heinen, that top line was still very, very good. And you would think maybe that was the chance that, all right, if Heinen's in that role, they're not as dynamic, but considering during that season there still was a vacancy next to Krejci for most of the year, that would have been probably the perfect opportunity to just slot Pastrnak in, but didn't really happen. So my guess is that it'll probably be Kasha. At least Kasha will get the first dibs. As much as the production wasn't there during the postseason for Kasha, I still think you have to be at least encouraged with kind of what he showed, especially in the early parts of that training camp, early parts of that Toronto playoff, where there were scoring chances there. It seemed like him and Krejci were meshing pretty well. Ends on a bad note that I think probably his worst game was that Game 5 against Tampa. I mean, I think by the end of that overtime, he was like on the 4th line.
He was on the 4th line.
Like, he was just out of gas. So, I mean, we'll see what happens for this offseason now, where, I mean, he didn't really have a restart training camp. He didn't really have anything like that. So I think he's the guy that would be interesting to see kind of fit into that role. But again, I think we talked about this last couple of weeks, but there's such a logjam of just guys who don't know where you're placing them yet, that, there's a lot of intriguing options. How many of them are legitimate, or how many of them are guaranteed to get you, 20 goals in a top 6 role? That kind of remains to be seen, but I'd imagine that probably Kasha has the first dibs there.
I was going to say, I think Kasha's the easiest option there. I think that if you give him time to develop chemistry with Krejci and DeBrusk, and you kind of let him settle into that role a little more, remember, he missed most of the return to play camp.
Yeah.
And then he also missed, I think, the exhibition games, or was he in the final exhibition game?
I think all 3 of the exhibition games. I don't think he played in them.
Yeah. So he just kind of came back. And so to me, I think that if you give him time, you're going to get that production. I mean, again, the scoring chances were there during the Carolina series and during the beginning of the Tampa Bay series, if I remember correctly. There were scoring chances. He just wasn't finishing them, but they were there, and there was you could tell there was something there. So I do think he could be a guy that shores up the right side. But as you said, you bring Pastrnak down to that second line, and I know we're both for this. You end up in a situation where you can't just shut down one line and then have the offense be dormant if you're opposing teams, because this is something that has happened in years past. You shut down that Bergeron line, and then the rest, and then you don't get scoring from the Krejci line or whoever's the third line or the fourth line.
Mm-hmm.
You want to spread. I think you do want to spread the wealth a little bit, so teams do have a tougher time shutting you down. They can shut down the Krejci's line and not necessarily shut down the Bergeron line, and vice versa. So, to me, I think it would be kind of bold for Cassidy to go out on that limb. It also is tough this year because it's not an 82 game schedule, so you're not getting that. These games. Not that they don't matter, but we know we're probably going to be in the playoffs. Let's try this out for a game or something. And he also has a quick trigger. I mean, how many times has he tried guys on certain lines and then by the middle of the second period, benches them or moves them back to where they were? So I do think that.
I also think it's a thing too where we've seen multiple times in which they've either double shifted Pastrnak or they've bumped him down a line just to get a little bit of a spark or switch things up. But I think you rarely see him start a game with a guy in a different spot. Like I can't think of a time in which even when Pasto is getting those extra shifts that you ever see like start a game like that, right? I can't remember the last time where we got the opening card on Twitter and it was Pasto with Krejci. I can't even remember a time that's happened. So
yeah, I was just saying I can't remember it either. I don't know when that has happened before.
I think people would be freaking out enough on Twitter that we would remember if it was. Yeah,
exactly. So Krejci's right side, Marchand, Pastrnak up top, and then we've talked about this a lot during our podcast. Is the left side on defense?
Yeah.
What is going to happen there? It feels like it's too late for a trade, which is unfortunate because obviously that would be very fun to hash out. We did last week with Noah Hannafin and the Max Pacioretty stuff, but it does feel like it's a little late for a trade.
Yeah.
Still could happen. But so you have the left side on defense. Obviously, Krug is gone. Chara has not re-signed yet. I think we'll see Chara re-sign if and when the season gets announced. I think you'll sort of hear the Chara re-signing train coming to town. So what happens with the left side on defense? I mean, what do you think they should do? What direction do they go? What's going on?
Good question. Yeah. Because I don't think we're breaking any new ground with Price, and that's the biggest question mark. Like losing Marchand and Pastrnak's not great. You know what the results are going to be, and they're going to be lessened by not having them in the lineup, but you at least have options that you're able to kind of tread water. The Bruins left side could be a complete disaster if any of these guys don't pan out or guys have sophomore slumps. So in terms of, who fits where, that's kind of the bigger issue, right? Because there's a lot of different guys that could fill in that role, but I don't know how many of them you feel pumped or excited to see what they do in a top 4 role, right? Like I imagine right now it's Grzelcyk and McAvoy probably, which even then, like I think we're big fans of that. It's an intriguing kind of pairing, but there's probably a lot of, experts or people who look at that and be like, that's way too small of a top pairing. That's too much risk. Depending on have 2 playmaking guys. But after that, like who fits in with Kahlo? Is it Lozon? Because he's probably maybe the most tenured guy on the left side right there in that role. Where does John Moore fit into it? Does he start over, guys like Vakanainen or Zaboral who should get probably those reps who I think at this point you need to find out what you have in them, right? I mean, Zaboral I think is probably going to start on the NHL roster because he has to clear waivers otherwise. So, I think this is a chance for you to see what those guys bring. And if these guys can just, fill in what their role is, play 15, 17 minutes a night, responsible hockey. I don't think you're expecting Zaboral to be a world beater, be a guy who's going to have, 20 plus points as a rookie. But if he's, making the good first pass, he's, not getting caught in the D zone. If he's, just helping in the transition game, which seems like is what he was praised for in Providence. Like he's not like this super flashy guy, but it seems like he was doing a better job at, adhering to the smaller details of the game. If he does that role, then the Bruins don't have to worry about it. But if he doesn't pan out, if Vakanainen doesn't pan out, if Lozon, who I think was very good for most of the season, struggles from going from third pairing and kind of those easier matchups to maybe being more of a shutdown role with a Kahlo, then you're in trouble. Then that impacts the production you probably get out of Rask and Halak, where both those guys have been great the last few years, but they also have been aided quite a bit by having a very structured defense in front of them. So if that unravels, It'd be typical like Bruins misfortune if like the offense exceeds expectations. Like Craig Smith has 25 goals, Kasha has 20 goals, Richie has 15 goals, Stanika like is a Calda contender, and like their defense is just horrible. Their defense is like 20, first in the league. Like that would be a typical Bruins misfortune thing, which I don't think is going to happen. I still think they adhere to that kind of Cassidy zone defense. They've got enough solid younger players there that can fill in the roles with McAvoy and Carlo, but you still don't have, a large portion of your decor. You have a lot of players jumping in that you're not really too confident about. So again, I think we've said this too. We'd love to be wrong. We'd love to them to all fit in seamlessly, but for a team like this that you're hoping to contend for a cup, to have that many question marks, you have to at least enter the season kind of uncertain as to what you're going to get, because I don't think you can kind of view that with rose-colored glasses when kind of considering what the stakes are this year of how much you need this team to make a long run.
And that's the thing. I think it seems like John Moore is going to be getting a good amount of time this year, I think. Because I think there are going to be games where they start Zaboral or Vakanainen in there, and they kind of look iffy, and they're inconsistent, and Cassidy's going to say, I want the veteran. I want John Moore in there. I want to add it. We'll do 4 righties and 2 lefties tonight or something of that sort. I agree with you. I think on the left side, it is so open. Your candidates for the left side again after Grzelcyk are Lazon, which Cassidy seems to be very high on, John Moore, Zaboral, Vakanainen. Maybe I'm forgetting someone, but that's the left side. On the right side, obviously, you have Carlo, you have McAvoy, you have Clifton, you have also Chara at the left side potentially.
Yeah, if Chara comes back, at least that solves at least one of your issues in terms of you at least have someone who obviously he's not going to be a top pairing guy anymore, but one less kind of question mark you have to
do you think there's any chance they come into the season with Chara and McAvoy as the top pairing again?
I mean, if the rest of the decor doesn't look that great, then you might
That's
have
what
to.
I think.
I
think there's a weird chance that could happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's ideal, but
no.
I think
could
it's
see
definitely
it,
a possibility.
I could see it though, and I would not approve of that, and I don't think many people would. But I could see them coming into the season just doing it for just consistency's sake.
Yeah.
The next thing, and this is a little bit more clear because I think there's 2 clear-cut candidates for this, and I do think they have. I think there is a right answer. Who takes over quarterback in the power play from Torrey Krug? Everyone thinks either McAvoy or Grzelcyk. I think Grzelcyk is the guy.
Yeah.
And I do think that you're going to see the power play at some point potentially become stagnant. It's not going to be great. People are going to say, my God, this is why they should have re-signed Krug. And, there's going to be tons of outrage over this. But I think Grzelcyk is the guy. The numbers from the past have indicated it when he's manned the top power play when Krug was out. So to me, it's Grzelcyk. I believe you're also a Grzelcyk guy on this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they signed him for that contract, a 4-year deal, and not expect him to take on a bigger share of responsibilities. You could make the case that maybe McAvoy is due. He really hasn't had that much time on the power play, especially with that top unit. But, I mean, the writing was on the wall when Krug was either out or, injured. It was usually Grzelcyk would get the first call. And is he as dynamic as Krug on the power play? No. He's much more, when you see him out there, he's more – walking the blue line, keeping pucks in. He's not, Krug would go down on the half wall, looking for seam passes and stuff like that. But also, granted, when you're Grzelcyk and you're working with, when healthy, Bergeron and Marchand and Pasternak, like you don't have to be that dynamic, right? As long as you're fishing pucks out and getting them back, into a guy like Marchand, you're doing pretty well, and the chances are going to be there for you. So I don't think he has to drastically augment his game. I'm sure as he gets more comfortable in the role, they'll probably have him doing a little bit more. But I would imagine he's probably the guy who gets first dibs there. But I wouldn't be surprised if also they start maybe incorporating, before it would be, McAvoy wouldn't get remotely close to that top power play unit. If, that power play unit gets stagnant, I could see them giving more of those chances to McAvoy or seeing what happens there, because I think one of the most interesting things you're going to see this year is what Cassidy kind of talked about after the season ended, is that he wants to get more offense out of his defensemen, and he's going to work more exclusively with them. So that might not just be conducive to the power play, but I think you're going to see a lot more guys be more aggressive or be more willing to take shots, jump up into the play. So I think that's going to be fascinating to see how that might impact guys, playmaking guys like a McAvoy or a Grzelcyk going forward this year.
I was going to say, I think that impacts McAvoy the most in the sense that
Yeah.
if you remember back to like 20, this is such a small sample size, but if you remember his debut against the
Hmm.
Senators in the 2017 playoffs, nobody was more dynamic on the ice than McAvoy. On the
Yeah.
power play, jumping up into the offense, taking shots. And it felt like over the last few years, he's kind of been neutered in a sense offensively, where he's been with Chara, more that going against other teams' top line roles. The defense, I think, has been kind of more important, or at least higher on his list than the offensive side of the game has been. And I feel like now, if you can put him with someone like Grzelcyk, and then if you can put him maybe near the top unit, give him a few chances up there, you're going to see him be more dynamic if you kind of just let him come out and let him do those things. Because I feel like the past few years, maybe he hasn't been so much allowed to do those things and have those sort of freedoms. So I think he's someone who greatly benefits from that, kind of letting his wings go, letting him
Letting him
flourish
fly.
in a sense, letting him fly. That would be the right word for it. So McAvoy is someone I do think that you're going to start to see a lot better out of this year. I still think though Grzelcyk is the guy for the top power play unit. And who would so on D it would be Pastrnak, Grzelcyk, and then down low it would be Marchand, Bergeron, and maybe DeBrusque, maybe Krejci, because I
Yeah.
know they like Krejci on that second unit just to kind of
Hmm.
even things out a little bit. So
Yeah. Or
we'll
Coyle,
see
if they want to have him as a net front guy, or
Coyle, Craig Smith, Nick
Nick
Ritchie.
Ritchie.
Nick Ritchie. Okay, so final question.
Nick Ritchie's going to score like 20 goals this year.
I know Nick Ritchie's gonna. I think Nick Ritchie is not going to be as bad as people think. I think he's
Hmm.
going to get lineup time, and I think he'll be okay. He'll be okay. Doesn't mean he's gonna be great. He'll be
Yeah.
okay. Um, maybe we'll see. I hope that is. I hope no one clips that soundbite when he like takes a really stupid penalty late in the game at the start of the season. So fifth question, final question for today's episode is centered around the goaltender Tuukka Rask. Does this is tough? How does Rask rebound? Because obviously last year ended, for some controversially. I mean, obviously we all support the decision. He did leave the bubble though, and I think some people still, at least Bruins fans, there won't be any in the building to yell at him or boo at him.
Mm. Yep.
But I do wonder how he responds. I also wonder you have a worse decor in front of you, I think, so that also doesn't help. We touched on that a little bit. I mean, how does he respond?
Uh, Hopefully by playing good hockey. No, I mean, I think for him in terms of, putting this behind him, which again, granted, he's probably not he's gonna hear this for a while. When fans come back in, it should be a joyous occasion if we get to, hopefully the spring, and we have some fans back in the stands. That'd be beautiful to have them back in time for the playoffs. And like, Paul Figueroa will still probably get booed because of it, because of people gonna remember last year. But
No one will know if it's Took or
yeah, exactly.
Boo.
Maybe that's a good thing. But I think for him, the best way to kind of put this in the rearview mirror is just to kind of hit the ground running and kind of keep up his level of production he had last year. Again, it's easier said than done when your decor in front of you is has taken a big hit. But you kind of look at the production you've got from him the last couple of years, how much I think it's benefited him and the Bruins to have a guy like Halak there, who not only is a great backup, but is also a guy that pushes Rask in terms of, competition for that starting role. We've seen over the years, especially of how much Rask has benefited from, rest and a low workload. So I imagine that's going to be the case this year, where it's a shortened season, coupled with the fact that also I think you're still going to get Halak getting a good amount of stats, especially where I think even if it's going to be 48, to 56 games, I think you're going to see a lot of back-to-back stuff like that. So I think you're going to see a lot of 50-50 splits there in those situations between Rask and Halak. So again, the easiest way to kind of, get past the situation is just to keep on playing good hockey, which he really hasn't dipped in his play at all in the last couple of years. If anything, I think he's been probably playing the best hockey of his career since Halak has come around. But I think that's the biggest key. Like, I'm sure once we get to the start of the year, you're gonna have a lot of people. That's gonna be a main narrative of like, is Rask head in the game? It's like, I mean, he's back home. Like, the season's not gonna be normal, but at least these guys are back at their houses. They're with their families. Like, it's not ideal how this season's going to be, mapped out, but it's a a much bigger improvement from being stuck in a bubble up in Toronto. So I'm not that concerned about the goaltending right now, but obviously I think you're going to hear that narrative nonstop. I mean, once we hit January, we're going to get a lot of that. I think the first couple of weeks, right? You know, the
Yeah,
first Ras presser is going to be a slog, to say the
yeah.
least.
I was going to say he has not spoken publicly to the media. I know he spoke to Steve Conroy, the Herald, back in I think September, but he has not spoken to like the media as a whole since after Game 2 against the Hurricanes. I think because I think he left before Game 3. If I remember, yeah, Game 3.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be fine. But I do still think with the defense rough in front of him, I think that is not going to help things. I don't think you're going to see, the same almost won the Vezina Rask as last year. But there's also the part of me that's like, remember the last time he played in a shortened season, he was great in 12-13. So obviously that's a long time ago, which is crazy to say that 2012 was like a long time ago, but it was 9 years ago now. But I do think that, the shortened season might benefit him, but I also don't think the defense in front of him is going to do him a ton of help, or at least as much help as it has in the past. So I think he'll be a top 10 goalie for sure. I don't think he will be a Vezina front runner, so to speak.
Yeah.
Got to have some level of skepticism, right? That's our job. We got to be a little skeptical sometimes.
Of course.
So I think he'll be good, but not, number 2 in the Vezina as he was last season. So that's the biggest questions facing the Bruins right now. It's funny, before we go, you mentioned I'll leave listeners with this amazing thought in their head, because maybe this will get them to be motivated to watch Corona get crumble under itself. I was thinking about last night. You mentioned when fans come back. Think of what it will be like the first time the building is full and no one needs to wear masks and COVID is like an afterthought. Whenever this happens, I don't know when this will be. This could be, generously the spring, could be next fall, could be spring after next, spring of 2022. I don't know when this will be, but think of the first time when people feel safe, when everyone's in their seat, when the seats are full, when it's just normalcy again. Can you imagine what that's the euphoria that's going to be? It's like just the sheer, like incredible, right?
It's going to be unbelievable. I mean, I think there's so much stuff I think either people have taken for granted or maybe are just excited just to, just the little things that, people are missing, like how much I think people miss just going to a bar after work to meet their buddies for a beer or something like that. There's obviously the greater things now, especially on the holidays, of missing family and stuff like that. But I think especially it's just the small things. Like for me, one thing I always miss now that I feel like, it's far down the pecking order, but I miss going to just like a coffee shop and like knocking out work for 3 hours. It's like working from home's okay, but like it lost its appeal back in like May, right? Like now,
Before May.
So there's so much stuff I think people are just going to be just absolutely pumped about to go back out and do normal societal things once again. I think especially for Bruins fans, continue to go back into the Garden is going to be just like an all-time moment. Hopefully the Bruins win that game. That seems like a game that would be totally would be like a 5-1 loss. It's like Game 5 of the Cup final, where like that game you go into it like, oh, this is going to be like a franchise defining game, and then it just end up being terrible. Like it would be like, I don't think you're probably going to get full people in the stands, best case, until next season, like the year after. Like maybe you get 50% by the playoffs. Like maybe I'm just either being unrealistic or too realistic in terms
all
of
the
that.
nurses and doctors who've been vaccinated can get free access to games.
Yeah, exactly.
They can sit in the stands.
I mean, they should get some box seats anyway, but
yes.
But it's still going to be just.
Well, you know what game it'll be like? It'll be like the game after the marathon bombings when they lost in like a shootout to the Sabres.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it'll be kind of like that, where it's like this, this incredible moment.
Which at the very least, there'll be one where you can at least play like, the opening, 5 minutes on repeat and be like, that was awesome. Like, I don't think anyone remembers that they lost that Sabres game.
That's
true.
Just
play the national anthem, and, that's what the big takeaway was. But, no, it's going to be great just to I've said multiple times that, like, I can't wait to be stuck in traffic again and be happy as like a pig in shit about being stuck like on the pike going forward. Which again, let's fast forward to the spring, the summer when that happens, and I'm pissed again, like being stuck in traffic. But I miss the normal, day to day things that I think we've all taken for granted, and I'm sure Bruins fans are excited to, be stuck on the tee going to the Garden again in due time.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of it like, I mean, if people aren't cheering throughout warmups, and if people aren't just like going absolutely bananas during the game, whenever this takes place,
Hmm.
I'll be so disappointed. Now, I do think people will. I don't think that people
Yeah.
will just sit there. Like, I think people are just gonna be so excited to get out. I mean, just to think of that. Like, I look back at videos I have on my phone from the Cup final, like how
Hmm.
crazy that was. And no one knew that just a few months later, or just not even a year later, we would be in the situation we are now. And like you mentioned things you miss. I mean, I miss the coffee shops. I miss going to class. I miss classrooms. When did you ever think someone would ever say that?
Nerd. I'm
Friggin'
just kidding.
nerd. But no, it's true. And I can't stand sitting in my room and doing work. I can't stand sitting in my room and doing class. It is mind numbing. I'm so sick of my rooms. And I want to I want to go get out in the world again. And I think that would
Yes.
be a fun thing to do. But speaking of normalcy, what are you working on at Boston Sports Journal that people can look out for?
Yeah, we're going to be keeping an eye on. Obviously, I think this is going to be a pretty pivotal week in terms of, again, if they want to have this January 13th start date, if they want to have training camp by, people mentioned the 1st of January, the 3rd of January, they're going to have to start coming to an agreement pretty soon. So we'll have all the latest here at BSJ on that. And then I think this week we're also going to be start looking at projecting the roster for this team. There's going to be an expanded roster. You could have a taxi squad. So it'll be a couple of interesting names that might get called up that's going to be with the Bruins the long haul this year. So we'll break that down over at Boston Sports Journal. So subscribe over at BSJ, and you can follow me on Twitter at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. And for CLNS Media, I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners have a great, great rest of your week.